Something for your mind, your body, and your soul.
Okay, so I'm Pauline. I'm interviewing Simon G. Powell for Monolith magazine. So how are you today then, Simon?
Very good.
Good.
Bit cold.
Yeah, it's been a bit cold recently. I mean, since December and stuff, so... But, you know, it won't be long, it'll be summer again. So let's look forward to that. And then, you know, we've got spring before that and lots of... well, I mean, we shouldn't be wishing away our lives anyway. We've got Christmas coming up too. So, anyway, the reason we're interviewing you is because we're very interested in the work that you're doing. And you've written a couple of books over the last couple of years. And they're related to the human relationship with our Earth and ultimately our universe. And I'm wondering, no,
there's another one. There's another one. Nobody's heard of this one.
So, we're wondering, is this a symptom of your self-described biophilia and gaiaphilia? Like, why did you write books?
Why did I write the books? Because I felt inspired to write them. I think through if people know, the first book, the Psilocybin Solution, that's about psychedelic mushrooms. And the reason I wrote a book about psychedelic mushrooms, and bear in mind that they are a Class A substance. I mean, they're classified alongside crack and heroin. So the fact that I wrote a book about this substance that's in these mushrooms obviously had to have been a good reason for that. And that was the inspiration I got from the experiences I had. So I had such profound experiences over the last 20 years that I felt compelled or obliged, really, to write a book about it and to look at the history of their use and to look at the what goes on in the brain and the relationship between chemistry and consciousness and all these kind of things. I felt it was an interesting subject area, and I felt compelled to write that book. And the second book, Darwin's Unfinished Business, that's about this notion of natural intelligence, that there's a kind of wisdom or intelligence to life. And that paradigm, that way of looking at life on Earth and the significance of life on Earth, and that there's a kind of wisdom to it, that all comes out of my psilocybin experiences as well. So basically, in a nutshell, I had a number of very profound experiences, and I felt that they were profound enough that I had to write these books in the wake of those experiences.
Could you describe those experiences a little bit more in detail? Like how it made you feel and why it was more compelling than any other experience that you'd had perhaps on any other substances?
Well, from my experience, the psilocybin experience it can be very profoundly spiritual. I'm not the only person, you know, it's commonly reported, even scientific studies that they've done not that long ago at Johns Hopkins University. People taking psilocybin reported mystical experiences, and that the experiences they had were in the top 5 most profound experiences they'd had in their lives. And with some of the subjects, it was the most profound experience they had in their life. So the experience can be very profound, and I think it's obviously different for everyone, but there are similarities, and one of the commonalities is the experience the interconnectedness of everything. And I mean, it's an old, you know, you hear this all the time. People will say everything's connected, you know, but psilocybin will give you a direct, rather than just being a sort of an intellectual, metaphysical idea. Through psilocybin, you just experience it. Really, you know, it becomes overwhelmingly apparent that everything is connected into a kind of a fluidic whole, and there's some kind of, in my experience, some kind of wisdom or intelligence that permeates that fluidic whole. And also, so that's one of the experiences. Also, I like during my mushroom fever period, like 20 years ago, I had a number of very profound visions. When you shut your eyes on psilocybin, you get visions. They were very profound as well. And most recently, from the mid-90s onwards, my preferred method. You've got to remember that Terence McKenna, who was like the authority on psilocybin for a long time, he's very missed, Terence McKenna. He used to advise people to take psilocybin indoors, unplug. In those days, you'd unplug your phones. There were no mobile phones when he was saying. Unplug all your phones and you lie down. And he would advise people to lie down in silent darkness and to have visions and to just pay attention to what was coming out of the unconscious.
Right.
From the mid-90s, I used to do that back in my mushroom fever period in the early 20 years ago. But since the mid-90s, my preferred method of taking the mushroom, and this has influenced my whole sort of metaphysical outlook, and it helped initiate, it led to this natural intelligence paradigm that I keep banging on about. My preferred method was to go out trekking in the most beautiful areas of the UK, and that would be that's the Lake District and Snowdonia, both of which are huge national parks, and the mushroom grows out there. So and I'd always be with one or two close friends, and that became you can pick the mushroom out there. You can be camped miles away from civilization, campfire, stars overhead, and that way of taking the mushroom out in nature, out in the wilderness. Really get to commune with the earth, with Pachamama, with Gaia. And there's a tremendously powerful communion between you and the wilderness environment around you, and that experience of being out in wilderness, which is really where we came from, where cities are sort of describe them cities. They're like cocoons, we're locked inside these concrete cocoon cities that are just permeated with human ideas and human values, whereas if you leave, I think it was Socrates or someone like that said that nothing interesting happens beyond the city walls. This is not true. Lots of interesting things happen beyond the city walls, out in the wilderness where the mushroom grows. And so those experiences I had, they, you have this intense, overwhelming communion with nature, with Mother Earth, and it's your view and appreciation and how you value the Earth's natural ecosystems and the biosphere, that will change in the wake of those kind of experiences.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I've read some other interviews with you as well, and you self-described it having some sort of devastating effects on you because your excessive use of psilocybin as it challenged your perceptions of reality. And I'm wondering what helped you cope on a daily basis to get through these feelings and to ultimately realise that you're actually okay and capable of writing a couple of books in a couple of years.
Well, yeah, that was my writing the books and making the films and all that kind of thing. That was my way of dealing with chronic biophilia and chronic gaiaphilia and the mushroom fever that I suffered from. So now this is just my way of this is English humour. Chronic. I mean, biophilia means a love of all things natural. A love of the biosphere and this kind of thing. Chronic biophilia is where you just fall in love with Pachamama, with Mother Nature, and chronic gaiaphilia is the same. So yeah, writing books and making films, that's the way I deal with those terrible afflictions.
Right. So we hear of a lot recently, especially about medical marijuana, and part of what you suggest is that we could use psilocybin as a sort of as a medication to help us through this attachment to human ideas. And I'm wondering how you envision psilocybin benefiting people as a whole. So
well, I think in my Manna film, which is about psilocybin mushrooms, it's not just about psilocybin mushrooms, it's the inspiring effect of psilocybin mushrooms. At one point I state that the mushroom is like an antidote to our ecological destructiveness, and I still stand by that. And I made that film long time ago. I think what we need at the current time is a renewed relationship with the biosphere. We're very cut off from the biosphere. People don't know about ecosystem services. They don't know about the dynamics of the biosphere and the fact that the biosphere is what supports us. You often hear this term spaceship Earth. That's because the biosphere is like a spaceship. It's a life support system, and we need to establish a right relationship with the larger biospherical system in which we're embedded. And I think one of the virtues of psilocybin is its eco-psychological impact, that it can lead to, or it can help the human race to establish a right relationship with the rest of the biosphere. That sounds like a really radical thing, a means to achieve that, but we live in critical times. So the renewed interest now in psilocybin and looking at the various therapeutic applications of psilocybin, and there's lots of studies going on now, that's complemented by a renewed growing interest in ayahuasca as well. And ayahuasca is always often referred to as a strong medicine, a medicine, because it helps you deal with issues you've got, unresolved issues, and it helps you gain balance and brings you back, to a more healthy state where you're in touch with yourself and the rest of the environment. I think it's totally, it makes sense to view substances like psilocybin and ayahuasca as, spiritual medicines that are worthy of investigation, and we should explore how best we can use them. But they've been long revered by indigenous cultures, ayahuasca and the mushroom. So it only makes sense, I think, because it has been established now by science that they do have therapeutic effects. It makes sense to try and integrate those substances into culture, and that would mean you do what you can to maximise these potential virtuous effects.
So it's
all about the issue is how you integrate those substances, because at the moment they're illegal. I mean, you talked about cannabis. I mean, there's people in America now, I think a few states recently changed the law. Things are changing very, 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 very slowly, but they're changing in the right way, I think. We need to get rid of this knee-jerk fear reaction and admit that these substances have got a good side to them, particularly psilocybin. As I say, that's why I'm interested in the mushroom, because it's quite wonderful. The effects can be quite wonderful, and people need to know about that. And it's ridiculous that it's a Class A substance, classified. What I'm talking about is classified alongside heroin and crack cocaine, which is absolutely insane.
Unbelievable. That because naturally grow, doesn't
So,
it? So,
well, yes, the fact that they changed the law in this country, in the UK, in 2005, I think they actually made the natural mushroom itself became. Previous to that, you could go and pick these mushrooms and eat them, and it was all legally fine. You know, the fact that they made the actual fresh indigenous mushroom of the United Kingdom, they made that illicit and illegal. That's unprecedented. That's a psychotic thing to do. That they would make something which is part of the British landscape. If you believe in God, then God made these these fungi. You know, so the idea that you could go out into the countryside, you could see this mushroom, and just like you pick blackberries or you know, sweet chestnuts or something.
yeah.
And the notion that you can pick this natural resource and suddenly you're committing a heinous crime, it's absurd, you know. Someone once said, and I think it applies to the mushroom as well, I think might have even been Timothy Leary, that for instance, cannabis causes psychosis in people that don't use cannabis.
Right.
And I think it's the same with these substances. They do cause psychosis, but in the people that don't use them, you know. So we need to view these substances differently. And having met a number of the researchers in America who are doing research with psilocybin, the aim of doing these therapeutic studies that are showing therapeutic efficacy is that when they've published enough papers, then the authorities will have no choice but to reclassify those substances, because for a substance to be Class A or Schedule A, as it's called in America, one of the criteria for that is that those substances have no medical usage whatsoever. Right. So all these papers coming out now about marijuana and particularly psilocybin, they're showing that they do have therapeutic applications, and so they will eventually have to reclassify them. And once they're reclassified, that makes research easier, because at the moment it's very hard to do. You've got to go through loads of red tape to get permission and licenses and all this. So it's a very, very slow process. But scientific organisations like MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, and the Hefter Research Institute, they're doing sterling work, because they're in for the long haul, you know, but they've been at this for, you know, decades now, and they are showing good results, and stuff is getting out there in the media. Some of the psilocybin studies were on, the BBC has covered it, CNN in America, it's been in Time magazine as well, I think. So there's a lot of publicity now.
Let's go mainstream.
Which is good.
So that's great. So I was wondering as well, in your books you differentiate between different states of consciousness, and I was wondering if you could describe to somebody that's never taken a mushroom before, how you would describe the etheogenic consciousness brought on by an ethogen such as a mushroom.
Well, that's like really, it's hard, because it's like trying to explain to a blind man what colour is. Imagine you meet a blind man he's been blind since birth. It's nigh on impossible to describe what it's like to see, you know, colours, to see. And it is like that. I think there's a couple ways I sometimes think about how you best to describe it. A lot of people, and myself included, say that it's like waking up more. We all know the difference when you wake up in the morning from a dream or whatever, and you're in your room and you wake up. There's that sort of clarity and resolution that comes along. You've shifted, your consciousness is greatly shifted. Well, taking psilocybin or any psychedelic is like waking up more. And that can actually be quite intimidating when it happens and you suddenly find yourself waking up more. You think, whoa, what's going on? You know, because everything, in the Manna film, I also said it was like consuming the truth, because you see what you are. The other thing, of course, is that psychedelic means mind manifesting. So I think what happens on, for instance, psilocybin, is that the contents of your subconscious and unconscious come into conscious awareness. So that's why any kind of unfinished business, particularly relationship problems and where you stand with other people and ideas you have about yourself, all this kind of stuff comes into conscious awareness. And anything that's crap and shallow, like pertaining to false personality and the ego, all this kind of stuff, you see through it all, and you see it brings into conscious awareness that which is essential, and anything that's crap kind of slips away. So you see things very clearly, particularly in your, I've had the experience where I was out around a campfire or somewhere in Snowdonia, and there was a particular relationship I had with someone at the time, and it was slightly stressful. All the relationships we have with people, sometimes they're slightly stressful, sometimes they're very stressful, other times they're good. Everything, the life, I think, the universe is all about relationships. Mm-hmm. When you've got bad relationships, your unconscious doesn't want to have these bad relationships. It wants to heal, make things fit together and work. So I had this experience with someone I had a slightly bad relationship with, and I was able to see that sort of inner problem. I was able to move around it like it was an object. I could just see it so clearly, and that was a really amazing thing.
Yeah.
So it just brings it lots of things happen on a psychedelic, and it's good for self-knowledge. It's good for getting rid of crap and seeing what is good and what is true.
Yeah, that's great. Well, your Psilocybin Solution book, the foreword's done by Graham Hancock, which I'm a big fan of personally, and I was wondering if you could tell me more about your relationship with Graham and his work as well, and how about doing the foreword for the book.
Yeah, I met Graham a few years. I was with this organisation a few years ago, and the plan was to make this film where we wanted to interview various people, and they were going to be in the film, and it was all about our relationship to nature and how we could build a sustainable future and all this kind of thing. And so we met Graham Hancock in Cancun, actually. I think that was 2010. And that was when we first met him, and that was quite good. Did some interviews. Then we went to visit him in Bath, where he lives, went to his house and stuff. I had dinner with him on one occasion. Then I wrote some script for a film that this organisation made. Graham was like the host of this film. It was a 15-minute film, Earth 2.0 Initialization it was called, and I wrote his script. I wrote the script for the whole thing, and he presented. He was the presenter of this thing. So that at one point when I met him, I said, because I knew he had an interest in ayahuasca, so I just asked him if he'd write a foreword. He wrote very good foreword for the Psilocybin Solutions. So that's how I know him, and I was author of the month for November. The month that's just gone on his website. That's just finished. So. So yeah, he's a good contact, and he's got an open mind, and he's an interesting guy.
Yeah, very interesting.
We have slightly different interpretations of what the psychedelic experience is in regard to the visionary side of it.
Right.
I've seen him talking about entities from other dimensions and this kind of thing. Where I favour I'm of a more Jungian persuasion, and I see the visions as being the language of the unconscious, the symbolic language of the unconscious. unconscious. That there's a wisdom that what Terence McKenna called the other.
Okay.
This tutorial, wise intelligence that you can contact that shows you things, and I think that's us.
Yeah.
It's the unconscious.
Right.
But yeah, he's a good bloke, Graham.
Yeah. So in your film that you did, you expressed reference to natural intelligence and that humans should appreciate it more, and perhaps we don't appreciate it so much recently over in the modern world. And I'm wondering whether you could give us any sort of reason why you think that might be the case, why we can't see this natural intelligence, and how you would suggest that we can start seeing it again. How can people start seeing it again?
I think that's a massive question.
Yes.
That's why I wrote this Darwin's Unfinished Business, because it's all about this paradigm of natural intelligence, and it's not easy to delineate fully that paradigm. Suffice it to say that I think one of the problems we have, or I see it as a problem, is that words like design, technology, and intelligence, we've hijacked those terms, and they only apply to things. So when you think of design, you think of human design. Yeah. When you think of technology, you think of, well, yeah, I'll give you an example I gave him in this Darwin's Unfinished Business book. Biotechnology now, one of the most lucrative industries around at the moment, and will continue to be, I think. They've now got, through genetic engineering, they can get a cow to secrete insulin in its milk. Right? So you can collect milk from a cow and have insulin in it, right?
Okay.
Now, for a diabetic, if you're a diabetic and you need insulin, you think, well, that's impressive. That's impressive biotechnology. So when you think of biotechnology, that's the kind of thing you think of. Similarly, they've genetically engineered bacteria to produce insulin and other medicinal drugs. Yeah, that's what they do with various. This is one thing you can do with genetic engineering. So they're examples of biotechnology, but really biotechnology, nature, life itself is a biotechnology. So, but the thing is we'll be impressed by the fact that you can engineer a cow to produce insulin in its milk, but we won't be impressed by lactation. The fact that this cow can produce this nutritious substance that can feed its young, that's a natural technology that life can through DNA and genes can engineer that kind of biological system. So one of the problems facing me in trying to promote this natural intelligence paradigm is, like I say, design, technology, and intelligence are things we associate just with ourselves. I'll give you another example, right? If you look at examples of non-human intelligence, right? People will often talk about chimpanzees and their ability to fish for termites with a stick. Yeah, you must have seen this on the David Attenborough or whatever. Yeah, you'll see a chimpanzee with a long stick poking around and managing to spear termites. And scientists, right, they will say, that's a good example of intelligence. But what about the hand-eye coordination of the chimpanzee? What about its visual system? What about its lungs that are taking in oxygen to supply energy to its cells? Everything about the chimpanzee or any organism, it's clever and smart and naturally intelligent. So I'm also reminded I'm not alone in this natural intelligence thing and saying that life is a kind of intelligence or a kind of technology, because the biomimicry movement, which are growing in strength every year, have you heard of the biomimicry movement? Yeah. The the biomimicry movement, if people are not familiar with it, what they do is they're looking for solutions to problems, technological solutions to problems. They're looking at nature for solutions. Yeah. So if they want to, for instance, if you want to say you want to cover a building with some kind of substance that can't get dirty. That sounds, how the hell are you going to do that? They'll look to certain organisms. I can't remember. I think it might be sharks or the lotus flower. There are certain organisms that the surface doesn't get dirty because of the precise structure of the surface. So what the biomimicry movement are doing is, and they've also got the lotus leaf water droplets don't settle on it. It can't get wet, a lotus leaf. So they've made clothes now that are based on a lotus leaf, and you can throw water or liquid on it, and it just runs off. Yeah. Yeah. There are mussels and other crustaceans. I think mussels are that produce really powerful glues underwater. So even though the conditions are wet, they can produce really strong glues. Well, this is of interest to various human technologies. So what I'm saying is the biomimicry movement, they look to life itself to get solutions, to learn things, to study. Look, how does nature do it? It's evolved all these solutions to living and being. So, and the biomimicry movement, they define it as the conscious emulation of nature's genius. So they've said it, nature's genius. I think it's more than a metaphor. So the natural intelligence paradigm that I bang on about is precisely about nature's genius. That life itself is a kind of, I think it's an unconscious intelligence, but it's a kind of autonomous, unconscious intelligence. And the sooner we understand that life as a whole, the biosphere, I'm talking about all the ecosystems and how life sustains itself, because it's sustained itself for over 3.5 billion years. The sooner we get in harmony with that, we can only carry on the human race, human culture, if we fit into the larger biospherical system. And the only way we're going to fit healthily into and get the right relationship, I was talking about relationships earlier on, the only way we're going to have a right relationship with the biosphere, we've got to start admitting that there's an intelligence to life. And there's intelligence. If you walk into the Amazon rainforest or any ecosystem, it's not all random. The fact that the Amazon can sustain itself for millions of years, a rainforest can last millions of years, is because there's a wisdom to the way all that biologic in there, the way that biologic behaves. So the sooner we acknowledge all that and learn from it, the better. You can see I get quite passionate about this. I surprise myself sometimes.
Because at the end of the day, we do need our...
I get a lot of criticism for all this natural intelligence thing. It gets confused with the intelligent design movement, which is really a form of
sort of
religion.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
That's not what I'm about, because they see intelligence as being something outside of life and nature, and I see intelligence as being an intrinsic aspect of life itself, not a conscious intelligence. It's an unconscious intelligence.
So I've seen that.
So yeah.
So you're writing a new book as well. Is what will you be covering in your new book?
Well, the new book, the working title of that, I'm about 3/4. It won't be long before it's finished. The working title of that is In Love with Gaia, the Revelations of a Psychedelic Mushroom Eater. And it's really about my experiences over the last 20 years, 25 years, because in the Psilocybin Solution, I didn't really talk about my own experiences.
Right, okay.
So this book is very personal, and it talks about my experiences I had and how the whole natural intelligence paradigm, what inspired that, and so it's a very sort of personal book.
Okay. We don't want to give too much away about it at the moment, so
It's still a work in
progress. Okay.
yes.
So in your movie, we got a lot. You played the music to that, yeah. So
Well, there's more than one movie. There's 2 movies. There's one. The first film was Manna.
Yeah, I've seen that one.
That's the main one. That's the most popular one. I made another film called Metanoia about the natural intelligence paradigm, but people don't seem to like that quite as much.
Well, I didn't matter people not liking that.
Yeah, I did.
Maybe it's just not. It didn't come up first of all when I searched for you, but I will definitely give that one a watch because I did enjoy watching the other one.
Yeah, I did the music in both those.
Music, man. So, do you have an album coming out as well?
No.
No, just
no. But as I said to you earlier, I do have a single. I suppose you call it. I've released this song. I've actually released 2 songs now. But I recently released a song on iTunes and Amazon and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I'm grateful if you could tack that on because I made a nice video. If you could tack that on.
No, that will go in the end. Yeah.
It cost me $15 to get that song distributed, so I want to. I want a few
not
people
too bad,
to
I guess.
15. That doesn't count all the effort that went into making it.
No, well, no, of course, it would have, it's your time's worth more than that. So,
That's great skill.
So, you've got a talk coming up in Hackney Wick in London on the 9th of December at 3 o'clock, I believe. Which I'll be coming to myself. Yeah. But just to people that haven't heard about it already, what can we expect?
What can we expect? I don't know. This is the first. I've never done anything. I was asked to do this. Yeah, I'm a very shy person.
Okay.
So I don't solicit interviews or anything. But Darren Springer, who set up the what's it called, the psychedelia railway gatherings or something like that.
Yeah.
He contacted me and said, "Do you want to do something?" And the only thing I could think of was that we use a projector thing that you connect to a laptop and we screen my Metanoia film, so you can see it. Be quite good to see it big with a good sound system. I say, there's original music going through. So that might be quite cool. And I said I'd take questions afterwards. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that's. But I'm going to take my guitar. I went there to have a sort of sound check. Because I played it electroacoustic ambient guitar, and I miss playing. I used to be I was a licensed busker on the underground for many long time, and I miss playing in sort of places with a nice echo and reverb.
Right, yeah.
So I'm going to take. So when people turn up at 3 o'clock, they should hear me before they see me. They hear me first because I'm going to fill this room with the ambient. Atmospheric guitar, so
Oh, sounds very.
But yeah, basically the main thing is the film, and then I'll do questions afterwards. See or attempt to answer people's questions.
Well, I think you've answered all my questions very well, so I'm sure you'll be fine. So don't worry about that at all. So I'm just going to round that up, and we'll finish this off by putting your song on the end here. What's
cool.
the song? Did you call
it's
it?
Cool. Yeah, it's not. I wouldn't say it's a profane song, but it's not a sacred song, that's for sure. It's called "Good Trip."
Oh, okay.
So it's a sort of thing. People have said it's very upbeat. It's got a sort of 60s feel to it, and it's the sort of thing. Yeah, I mean, if you're going to be voyaging at any time, it's probably quite a good song to listen. Might be a good song to listen to before you voyage because it's upbeat and it talks about having a good trip,
Great. Okay. Well, we'll listen to that now. Thank you so much. Cheers. Bye.
Okay. Thank you, Bonnie. Cheers.
Something for your mind, your body, and your soul.
It's a turning on of the body to the body.
It's the power to arouse curiosity.
No one had a bad trip. It was all very good.
So what do you say?
No one had a bad trip. It was all very good.
That's all. That's all it's very good.
So what do you say?
Something for your mind, your body, and your soul.
It's a turning on of the body to the body.
No one had a bad trip. It was all very good.
That's all. That's all it's very good.
So what do you say?
The goal which one acts on. A journey of force, hot like the sun and wet like the rain.
It's a turning on of the body to the body.
No one had a bad trip. It was all very good.
That's all. That's all it's very good.
No one had a bad trip. It was all very good.
That's all. That's all it's very good.